Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't.
All right, 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as an influencer? Would you like to improve your strength in this area? And imagine the people in your life who have been positive influencers. How do you hold them in your mind? What qualities do they have in common? Whether or not you think you're an influencer, you are. And whether or not you think you are influenced by others, well, you are as well. And fortunately, when it comes to influence, we can all improve our skills at exerting it and noticing how we are influenced. One of the best people on the planet with whom to discuss this important topic is my new friend, Dr. Zoe Chance. Zoe is one of the most powerful and likable people I've ever met. She is a researcher and a professor of the most popular course taught at Yale School of Management on the topic of influence. She's also the author of a book I absolutely loved and have recommended extensively called Influence is Your Superpower: The Science of Winning Hearts, Sparking Change, and Making Good Things Happen. I am not alone in my love of Zoe's work, and scores of luminaries like Adam Grant and Daniel Pink have endorsed this brilliant book that I believe will make you smile as you get smarter. Zoe's work is not about influencing through manipulation or blindsiding people. Rather, it is about helping people access their authentic truths and reaching their goals through kindness and collaboration. So listen in as Zoe and I have a lively talk about how to rock your superpower of influence. Dr. Zoe Chance, who has asked me to call her Zoe, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you, Dr. Adam Dorsey. It's a pleasure.
And of course, I hope you'll call me Adam.
Can I call you Enthusiasm?
I would love it if you called me Enthusiasm. I'd be honored.
Do your listeners know where that came from?
Some of them do. So yeah, in high school, that was my nickname. The drummer in my band, for whom I played bass just well enough to not get kicked out, gave me that name. Even then, I was kind of an organizational psychologist in my band, keeping people happy and smooth. But oh my gosh,
cool.
Your book just blew my mind. And geeking out to your work, listening to various podcasts that you've been a part of, getting to know your TEDx talks and a whole host of other avenues that lead to you, Zoe, have been so crucial at this time when we are being influenced by various sources and we exert influence, and we may have misconceptions about what influence itself even means and is. Can you tell us what influence is and what it is not from your perspective?
Sure. Influence is anything that affects a change in somebody's thinking or behavior. And this is a very broad definition. What it means is that we are already all influential. We are influencing people. We're influencing situations, AFT, and we're influencing them in unintended ways if we're doing it unintentionally.
Definitely. And you even cite the idea that babies are influencing, and you and I both are parents, and
oh my God, every parent knows. Yes.
So,
yes, babies are the most influential people on the planet.
How so?
Influence is our superpower and our birthright, and the only way that we've survived individually and the only way that we've survived as a species. As babies, we're influencing people around us to take care of us and protect us, feed us, hold us, keep us warm. And you can't even talk, but you're exerting your influence even without words. And as we grow, small children, oh my gosh, they're the most difficult people to negotiate with, right? Like out of everybody. At some point, we get trained by parents and teachers. Most of us get trained to play nice and make ourselves small. And we start to have ambivalent feelings about influence, so that by the time we're adults, we still are influential. And that's the only way that humans are able to band together and work together and span the globe. And yet we could each have so much more influence than we already do if we weren't holding ourselves back, especially because of some misconceptions or just some assumptions we have about influence, like that it's manipulative to try to influence another person, things like that.
And that's such an important distinction. And you give the point so beautifully that it's not for manipulation. It is for actually being more in touch with what you want. And that when all parties get the memo about influence and being able to negotiate well and being able to engage at a higher level, it's not like a dark art of the Sith, to use a bad Jedi as an example, but rather it's so that we can actually have higher level conversations. Like if everyone had this technology, if everyone had read your book, the quality of our conversations would not be us interacting with a child who's being just very narrow-minded and cognitively rigid and difficult, but rather we would probably be dancing better together in the form of these negotiations and conversations.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And influence is power. So it's like electricity in that you could use it for good things like lighting up a school, or you could use it for bad things like an electric chair. It's not that influence itself is good or bad, but I'm writing this book to teach people ways of working together and making good things happen. And this includes good things for you. So it's not just about you being an altruistic, self-sacrificing martyr and trying to help everybody else. I'm 100% committed to you helping yourself along that path as well, because you're one of the people to make great things happen for. But we don't have a lot of books on influence in relationships, which is what I'm writing about. We have a lot of books on transactional influence, where they might be applicable for sales situations like used car salespeople. The used car salesman is the quintessential yucky influencer, like smarmy, selfish, manipulative.
Or at least the archetype there, I'm sure, are very ethical. They're ethical, I'm sure, used car salespeople, but yeah.
Absolutely, of course. And I've had some great experiences buying cars, but the person who comes to mind when we think of a salesperson tends to be that. And I've worked in sales, right? And I know that master salespeople don't come to mind when we think of a salesperson, because we don't feel like they're selling us. We just feel like they're having a conversation with us. But we remember very well the creepy, sleazy ones, but those are not the most successful.
Right. What's it going to take to get you driving out of the lot with this car today? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about is somebody who actually takes time to get to know you. I too was in sales. And when people would tell me, wow, you're so good at sales that you could probably sell ice to Eskimos. And I said, no, I would never do that, because Eskimos do not need ice. I tell people what they need, and I get to know them first so that I can actually tailor what we have to what they need. And it's probably, and I also believed very much in relationships building, like it's not about closing the deal. It's about creating a good long-term relationship from which all stakeholders benefit. It sounds like you're nodding, and I'm guessing.
That's 100%. And it's also that Eskimos are not going to buy ice. So this whole idea is a misconception. But a lot of people who come to learn from me are thinking that I will give them that power. And I've misled them a little bit by, in the past, I used to say my job is teaching Jedi mind tricks. And I do teach things that are very helpful and effective, but you're not going to be able to mind control another person, just like they're not going to be able to mind control you either.
Right. And one thing we know is if we are mind controlled, we will slip into a cycle I call consent and resent. We will say yes to something, but later on we'll be really pissed. And I remember early on knowing my wife was for sure a keeper when we were negotiating where we were going to live, because we lived in very different places. And she just looked at me and said, unless both of us are happy, neither of us is happy. And I was just like, okay. And that's really the premise of your book. Whether you're talking about the kindly brontosaurus that we'll talk about perhaps later, or any of the questions, these are not to pull one over on another person. They're about helping to be more authentic for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the frame consent and resent. My colleague Gall Zauberman talks about the yes, damn effect, but consent and resent is even stickier. So I'm going to tell him about that too.
Oh,
It's
sweet.
great.
What's the yes, damn, by the way?
It's that when you ask somebody to do a favor or participate in something that's in the distant future, they have a mental construct that looks at how desirable is that thing. And if it sounds cool, they say yes. But then as the thing approaches, you shift your mental construct and you're focusing on feasibility instead of desirability. And you're like, oh, damn, I'm super busy and that's going to take a long time. And look at what I have to sacrifice.
Oh.
So it's consent and resent as well.
Right. And what an opportunity cost that represents. One of the things that you also cite is that influence is happening at all levels. And we humans are able to kind of tap into what you refer to as the crocodile and the judge. And I love how you describe system 1 and system 2 thinking in this way. Very, very easy to understand. Can you describe the crocodile and the judge?
Yeah. And I'm going to get super nerdy and say it's actually the gator, which is different. It doesn't matter to anyone except for me and a few wildlife biologists. But there's some important differences between alligators and crocodiles.
There are. I'm so sorry.
No.
Is it herpetologists?
Herpetologists.
Herpetologists.
Yes. The broad idea is that there is this key framework in behavioral economics that is the most important thing to understand about influencing another human being. And when I say most important, obviously this is Zoe's perspective. And my research background is in behavioral economics. If anyone listening has been reading in behavioral economics, like one of the biggest books was Danny Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. Another one was Dan Ariely, who is one of my Ph.D. advisors, his book, Predictably Irrational, and some more of these. System 1 and System 2 is the real name for these two systems that underlie all of our decisions and behavior. But what I've found is when I've been teaching behavioral economics, it's not very sticky. These terms, System 1 and System 2, it's easy to confuse them and forget what they are. So I use the descriptors instead of the gator and the judge. And the gator, System 1, for those of you who know what that is, the gator is unconscious, intuitive, emotional, habitual. And this is our primal system underlying maybe as much as 95% of all of our decisions and behavior. So as an influencer or a would-be influencer, that's super important. And like a real life alligator, it's lurking below the surface of our awareness, constantly scanning the environment for opportunities and threats. Most people, and this is an important difference between the gator and the crocodile, most people don't know how lazy an alligator is because it is so efficient. Gators weigh up to 1,000 pounds. Their brain is the size of a walnut. And they only even want to eat a couple pounds of meat per week. They can go, though, up to 3 years without eating anything at all. So their dominant response to everything in the world, almost, is literally nothing. And this is what is so similar to how we respond, we being all people, to influence attempts. We're being bombarded by influence attempts from people and companies and getting all kinds of stimulation from the world outside and inside our minds. And there's just too much. And so we are so lazy that typically will do nothing unless it's a major threat or it's an opportunity that isn't just a good opportunity, but it's incredibly easy. So like an alligator, if some creature or opportunity comes within their bite zone, they'll snap it up so quickly you can hardly see it move. And when we're in gator mode, we're almost effortlessly taking action or having these reactions. We're just not perceiving it because it's unconscious. And like driving would be an example of something that's gone to gator mode for most of us after we've been driving, say, at least a year or so. It's so freaking dangerous, right? You could die or kill other people every time you get in a car, but anything through practice becomes habitual so that you can be mindlessly driving a 1-ton dangerous vehicle at breakneck speed without thinking about it at all. And you're talking on the, hopefully you're not texting, but you're having conversations, eating, singing along to Boney M or whatever you're doing in the car. So this is the dominant mode that we're in, and it takes no effort. The other mode is the special cases. And this is what I talk about as being like a judge, where it is conscious, slow, deliberative, effortful. And like a human judge, it can only consider one case at a time. You can only focus your conscious attention on one thing. And like a human judge, it tries to be objective and make rational decisions. But like a human judge, it's also biased. It is largely biased by the unconscious actions and preferences of the gator. And this is not an anatomical explanation, but neuroanatomy does reflect this relationship where we have many, many more neurons, as I'm sure a lot of listeners know, and you know, Adam, that we have a lot more neurons going from the primitive regions of our brain to the prefrontal cortex, where we're making our rational decisions, far more than going in the opposite direction. And you can think about if there's something in your life that you enjoy, you can find all kinds of reasons to do or excuses to do that thing. Something that you don't enjoy, you can find all kinds of reasonable excuses not to do it, but you cannot just reason yourself into enjoying something that you hate.
That is a really important idea. And there are things that viscerally I cannot stand, for example, certain types of foods.
Like,
and for me, my God, it would be liver, boiled eggs. To me, they smell
like sulfur. Disgusting.
Yes, totally. And tuna from a can. I'll do sashimi, but for some reason, canned tuna, forget about it. I cannot get myself to like those things. And you actually make this as an argument akin to like things that we can't stomach intellectually. Could you kind of bridge that?
Yeah, I find it really, really interesting that ideas that we find threatening are processed in the same brain regions, like activation in the amygdala, as physical threats. I also find it really fascinating that the social pain of rejection is processed by our brain in the same way as physical pain. So our brain is really not distinguishing so much between actual threats and pain and intellectual or emotional threats and pain.
So we are way more emotional than we give ourselves credit for. I know that Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, who you talked about earlier, really were able to demonstrate, I'm sure Dan Ariely has as well, like how incredibly emotional we are as a species, and we don't really give that much credit. Is that consistent?
Yeah. And this is especially true for men who are trained to control their emotions and suppress them much more than women are, although women are also trained to control and suppress our emotions.
Let's go there for a second. You actually spoke a bit about Jennifer Lawrence and women being willing to exert their influence and how much shaming there can be in that process. When it comes to gender and influence, what are some of the challenges, particularly that women face?
One of the big challenges that women face is men have the same challenge, but women just have it much bigger. That women in particular are expected to be warm, and men do better when they're warm as well, right? Like, you're such a warm human being and this is part of your success. But if you're not warm, you could still succeed and have people respect you and like you. But if I am not warm, that's going to be a huge problem. And I'm going to face backlash, and people are going to call me to my face or behind my back all kinds of gender specific B words.
Yes.
Isn't it crazy that girls are called bossy? Like, that's the craziest thing to me, that we're saying you should not act like you're in charge. You
Absolutely.
should not be in charge.
And I couldn't agree more. I heard Sheryl Sandberg talking about this idea of calling a girl bossy and how it's okay. And the guy who does the same thing is lionized as being really assertive. So there are these norms that we're expected to conform to. And oh my God, they are really not fairly loaded.
They're not fairly loaded. And women also face the extra complication that for us, more than for men, there can be a trade-off between warmth and competence. So warmth and competence are the two fundamental dimensions of social judgment. So every time we're meeting somebody or interacting with them, we're deciding, do I like them and do I respect them? It roughly goes along with a gator versus judge idea, where gator is asking, do I like this person? And then judge is asking, do I respect this person? But like we talked about, the gator being far more powerful than the judge, liking is far more important than respect in terms of how influential we're going to be. We can make all kinds of excuses for someone that we like, and we can find all kinds of reasons to not interact with someone we don't like. And it just doesn't matter how competent they are. But for women, especially, if people don't like us and they're judging us, not liking us because we're not warm, then it doesn't matter how competent we are. And sometimes our expression of warmth can lead people to perceive us as less competent. And this is in particular for women who are at lower levels in a hierarchy, junior people. So for me, this is not an issue because now I'm a professor at this stage of my life. And so I can, in emails and things like that, tweets or whatever, I could use all kinds of emoticons and exclamation points and not worry about it. I'm trying to express warmth and it's fine. And I don't have to worry so much about making sure that people realize that I'm competent. But if I'm a junior woman and at my earlier stages of my career, I will still need to express warmth, but I have to make sure that the way I express it is not undermining perceptions of competence. And it's a tightrope that men don't have to deal with in the same way. And it kind of sucks, but there are all kinds of other great things about being a woman.
For sure. And one of them is so brilliantly articulated on a bumper sticker where you see, the difference between Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. And that Ginger was doing all the same thing that Fred's was doing, but she was doing it in high heels and a dress and backwards. And
what do you make of that?
I say it's really, quite frankly, the challenges of being female are humongous and they are not well represented or well known. And the things I take for granted as a guy, I can show up with my hair in a particular way. And if a woman does the same thing, what's going on with your hair? And nobody would ask me. So I recognize, and I'm humbled by, and actually a bit heartbroken by, just how rough it is and how much it squelches the voices of so many smart people who happen to be female.
Yeah. And also now, because of this moment in history that we're in, there are also all kinds of situations where women do have an advantage. Okay. So I don't take those for granted either. In business academia, in many of the worlds that I'm in, professional speaking, being an author in the categories that I am, I've personally been a beneficiary of, air quotes, benevolent sexism, where people are looking for women. Like, let's just take speaking. Because of all kinds of things in our society, women and culture, this is psychological, but it's also just logistical. Women are less likely to say yes to a speaking invitation, whether it's paid or not paid. And I've heard event planners say they need to invite 4 times as many women as men if they want to get gender parity. And what this means is that many more women are being invited to speak than men are.
That's fascinating.
That's one simple example.
And it's partially attributed to the fact that women are more likely to say no.
Yes. And a very ugly reason for that is that we have far more childcare responsibilities, for example, than men do. So it's more difficult for us to travel somewhere or do some extra thing. And then there's also the fact that, as far as I know, this is anecdotal, although most people agree, I haven't seen the research evidence for the idea that women feel that they have a higher bar for qualification for themselves. More of us feel imposter syndrome, although lots of men, and most of my favorite people, regardless of their gender, have been experiencing imposter syndrome.
I'm one of your favorite people.
Okay. Yeah, you can relate.
I can totally relate. So let's talk a little bit about some of my favorite things in your book. One of them was the magical question. And I've been using it all week with my clients and to great effect. What is the magical question? And the story behind it, certainly if you want to share about Gloria Steinem, which I found so riveting.
Sure. And thank you. The magic question is my number one favorite influence strategy. And you had actually mentioned it earlier on when we're talking about the smarmy used car salesman.
For sure.
So you could use it in a creepy way too. The question is, what would it take? And it can work very powerfully and effectively when you already have rapport with that person.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that you have to have a long-standing relationship with them or do something grand. But if you are trying to influence them, you do need to have some kumbaya feeling already. And you can't be the creepy guy who's just saying like, what would it take to get you into this car today? But the question is, what would it take? And the Gloria Steinem story that she shared when she came to my hometown of New Haven was this. When she was working on the problem of sex trafficking, and she was an expert on the issue. She was writing about it, speaking about it. She had just visited a conference about sex trafficking in Zambia. And after the conference, she goes to visit a village in a rural area near a game preserve where 3 young women had been sex trafficked the previous year, and they were lost and never heard from again. She's sitting on a tarp in the middle of a field with a group of women. And instead of sharing her expertise or telling them what to do, she asks the magic question, and she asks, what would it take for that to never happen in this village again? These women being lost to sex trafficking. And they told her an electric fence. An electric fence? They said, when the corn reaches a certain height, the elephants come and they eat it. They trample the crops. We have nothing to eat. We have nothing to sell at the market, and we have no money to send our kids to school. So these young women and their families were desperate. Gloria Steinem says, okay, listen, if I raise the money for the fence, will you clear the field and will you build the fence? They say yes. So she goes back home. All it takes is a few $1,000s. She raises the money, sends it back to them. And the way she describes it, a few years later, she comes back to that village to visit. There is a bumper crop of corn, and no young women have been sex trafficked, or women of any age have been sex trafficked from the village since they got the fence. What would it take is a magic question you can use in almost any situation. Hopefully, elephants and sex trafficking have very little to do with your life, but you can ask this. It's a respectful question. You're acknowledging they know things that you don't. They're the expert on their situation and their obstacles. You're not. And in a situation where you could be pressuring them, instead, you're shifting their mindset to collaborative problem-solving mode, which is pleasurable. And so often, what it takes is way less than you would have expected, way less than you might have been willing to do. And it's different from whatever you could have come up with. Like Gloria Steinem and Adam and I would never have come up with the answer of an electric fence because we didn't know that it's a human-wildlife conflict problem, not a sex trafficking problem and a poverty problem exclusively. When you ask, what would it take? It is usually the beginning of a conversation. It's not the end of a conversation. It's not like it's a magic wand. It's a magic question. Once in a while, it turns out there's nothing that can happen. And then at least you know. But the last piece of this that most people don't realize until I explain it right now is that when somebody tells you what it would take, they give you a roadmap. And after that roadmap has been followed, and you can come back and say, okay, here we are, that person has implicitly committed to supporting the outcome. So in this case, what I believe was going on with these women and the electric fence is that once they got the fence that they said they needed, the women are the ones who made sure that nobody from the village will be sex trafficked.
Folks, this book is, if you listen to it as I did on Audible, you'll be smiling most of the time. Zoe's incredible.
Oh, I love that.
And funny, and actionable immediately. I mean, it's that beautiful confluence of delicious, hilarious, and brilliant, like edifying. Immediately, you will get smarter. But one of the great ideas that you come up with, and you actually ask your management students to do, and you have a funny story about it, is starting off with a paperclip and bargaining up with that item. And I can't help but imagine that some of it may have a genesis from your childhood with your very bohemian mom who would be kind of like, let's just find it out in the world. But irrespective of that idea that I have, can you describe this idea that you have with the paperclip and moving up?
I never made the connection to the magic that I got to experience as a kid living with my mom, but I'm sure that you're right. And my mom is amazing. She's the biggest influence on me, and she's so much fun, and she knows how to make fun out of nothing. She lives with me now, and she came into the kitchen not that long ago with a cake and sparklers. And these are big fireworks, not like little candles, sparklers stuffed into it. It's on fire, and she's singing Happy Thursday to you. That is my mom.
Oh my God, I love her.
I love her too. Thank you. The bigger and better game. This isn't a game that I made up, but it's a game that I have co-opted as an influence exercise because it's so scary to go and ask people for something that's more than you can repay. And so we're trying to take people out of this matching mentality, like Adam Grant writes about in Give and Take. Most of us are matchers, and the idea that we're motivated by fairness and justice, and we feel we need to reciprocate all the time, and we hold ourselves back from being as influential as we could be because of this need to reciprocate. So that's why we play the bigger and better game in class. You start with something tiny, and in our class, it's a paperclip in honor of Kyle McDonald, who became famous with his red paperclip trading up. He traded up over 7 months, becoming internet famous, trading from a paperclip to a house in Saskatchewan, Canada, which was crazy and amazing. That's the inspirational story I share with my students. And then they only have 1 week. And so they trade up as many times as they want over the course of a week, and they bring the biggest, best thing to class the following Monday. And biggest and best is subjective. So some students will come back and somehow what they have is a collection of love poems. And some students will come back and have something completely bizarre, like a piece of marble from Saddam Hussein's palace. Other students come up with crazy stuff like a tree. These students, Manus and Tom, traded up between a Monday and a Thursday, 10 trades with New Haven business owners. And when they come back to class on Monday, they say, our thing was too big. We couldn't bring it to the classroom. Everybody come outside. And we go outside and there's a Volkswagen Jetta in the turnaround, and it says bigger and better scrawled across the windshield. They were ready to call every car dealership in the state, and the number of car dealerships that they called was 1. A car dealership in town, sales manager Caroline Heffernan, received their call, and she was so excited by the way that they framed this game that they're playing, and by their motivation was to trade up to a car so that they could donate it to a refugee family. And they gave it to a refugee family from Afghanistan. The mom had been commuting 2 hours a day on the bus, and she got to spend quality time with her family instead.
It's just so great. And it really conforms with the idea that you cite that people generally do actually want to say yes.
People are so much nicer than we realize or expect them to be. And in a lot of research experiments done particularly by a friend of mine, Vanessa Bonds, who also has a cool book about influence. It's called You're More Influential Than You Think. She's been doing studies for years showing how likely people are to say yes to an in-person request, more than we expect. And it's a multiple of 2 or 3 times. What I find also when I'm assigning students the challenge of an outrageous ask. So you go ask for something that's so big that you really don't think that you're going to get it at all, but it should be something that you deeply desire. And so in essence, this is a rejection challenge.
Totally.
But you're going and you're asking for this thing, and about 1/3 of the time, people say yes to that crazy thing that you didn't expect to get. But I also want to caveat this with, we have the opposite bias on the other end of the spectrum where it's less direct. So what I was saying, 2 or 3 times more likely to say yes to a one-on-one in-person request. But then when we're, say, posting something on social media and it's some great idea or fundraise or whatever this is, people are far less likely to respond to a distant kind of request like that, then we expect that they will be. And that is the reason that becoming influential takes a lot of conversations with a lot of people. Even President Truman at one point, shortly after he had become president, he said famously, "I sit around here all day trying to persuade the people to do the things they ought to do without me." That's all the powers of the president amount to.
That is such a profound idea. And I know that in the book Nudge, which I believe has just recently been revised by two of your colleagues from University of Chicago, describes various ways that we can nudge people to do the right thing and how hard that is to get people to do the right thing, so to speak, even if it's not along political lines, even if it's for everyone's benefit.
And for their benefit.
And for their benefit. Yeah, it's like you're not going to. Can you talk a little bit about that bias of the no, and I'm guessing
sure,
of the gator brain?
Absolutely. The idea that we could nudge anyone, including ourselves, to action, and that's what it takes to close this huge gap between intentions and actions is very powerful. And it's not that all nudges work for everything. And people got very excited about the concept of nudges when that book first came out. And they think it's going to solve all of our societal problems. It's not, but it's a good baby step in that direction. Anyone listening who's ever made a New Year's resolution knows that we just don't tend to do the things that we say that we will do. And we think that what's lacking is motivation. But typically what's in the way is just friction. And we need to make it easier. Whatever it is we want ourselves to do, whatever it is we want other people to do, we need to make it easier.
Right. And what might be some ways? Let's talk about something I know you care about deeply because you're giving 50% of your personal profits of this book towards environmental causes. What can a person do to assist in a very important cause so that people will be more likely to participate and contribute towards something that I'm just thinking about the lungs of this planet. I mean, this is not a political issue. This is an existential humanistic issue of like all of us being able to breathe and our children being able to. How do we nudge for things like that?
This is such an important issue, and it's so complicated because many of us are inclined to focus on behaviors with very small outcomes like recycling. Mm-hmm. And recycling is something like, yes, we should all recycle. Absolutely. And we can nudge people to recycle by just making recycling receptacles easily available. And maybe you put pictures of what can be recycled over this thing, and then we go ahead and recycle. If we're talking about personal responsibility, what matters far more is how many flights do we take? And however, what matters far more than personal responsibility are policies. So even if we look at flights, one of the huge things that needs to happen is that we would have frequent flyer penalties instead of frequent flyer benefits.
Wow. Never thought of that.
So this is just one of many examples.
I imagine
but that
would be a hard thing to sell.
I'm absolutely convinced it will happen. I'm absolutely convinced it will happen. Policy changes are what we need to save the environment. But the way that happens is through grassroots support for these kinds of policy changes. The organization I'm supporting this year for my donations from the book is 350.org, because what they do is exercise influence. It's a grassroots global organization of climate activists focusing specifically on changing policies to shift us away from fossil fuels.
That's amazing. I want to ask you about charisma. I know that you're a Prince fan.
Are you?
Oh my God. Yes. But you also talk about how, somebody you and I both love, Olivia Fox-Cabana, described how, Marilyn Monroe was able to turn on. You experienced Prince looking right at you.
So yes, charisma is something you do. It's not something you are, and it's something all of us can develop. And this idea that it's not something that you're born with, and it's something that you practice. I illustrate with these two stories of Prince in the book and then Marilyn Monroe in the notes. And because some people listening might have read the book, but probably haven't read the notes, I'll share the one about Marilyn Monroe, which is this article's beautiful article by a journalist who's describing his encounter with Marilyn Monroe. And he meets her at a bar where they intended to meet. And she's this quiet, pretty, but kind of mouthy, shy person. And she's this small little creature. And there's nothing glowing or spectacular about her. She's just pretty. And so they talk at the bar, and then they go together on the subway, and still on the subway. And now they are in the middle of a crowd of people. Nobody is noticing her. She's just this quiet Norma Jean. She's not trying to hide. She's just being herself. And they get out of the subway and back to the streets of New York City. And she says, "Would you like to see Marilyn?" He says, "Yes." And she fluffs her hair and she adjusts her coat. And all of a sudden the passersby come and swarm her because she's turned into Marilyn Monroe. She's turned on the charisma. I find that so fascinating.
And clearly you must rock it on some level, kind of a crossroads between charisma and hospitality for Danny Meyer, the CEO of Shake Shack, who has influenced the way you provide hospitality to your students, as well as, of course, your incredible competence has led you to become one of the most popular professors at the Yale School of Management, which is really a big deal because this is a tough crowd. But I'm wondering how you rock the charisma, how you rock whatever it is so that people say, I definitely want to be in Zoe's class.
You know, it's really weird. So my background was in theater and then sales and marketing. And I was winning presentation awards when I worked as a brand manager at Mattel. And so getting cast in lead roles and small films and regional theater and stuff. So I had what people call the actor's edge, but actually that was in part a liability when I first started teaching, because I thought that I should be the star of the show and I needed to get on stage and shine and just laser focus charisma, like Prince, how I described, he was so charismatic that the woman next to me literally fainted when we went to his show. And apparently that wasn't infrequent that happened. And I've never made anybody faint, but I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a teacher. And in the book, I share this mindset shift that Danny Meyer inspired. But what I didn't share in the book is something that was happening simultaneously is I was very sick and I had been traveling and I caught some kind of bug that was terrible and it lasted for months. And I was coughing and exhausted and I couldn't sleep and I couldn't speak very well. So at the same time as I'm reimagining how I'm thinking about the class, I was forced to do a lot of listening. And I was Norma Jean instead of Marilyn Monroe. And I am so much of a better teacher now. I'm actually not walking to the front of the room in a classroom where it's a discussion and I'm not blazing the way that I do try to if I'm giving a keynote, right? Like in a room of 7,000 people, it's not a little discussion and you have to shine out your energy as big as you can. But if I'm in a classroom of 30 people, it's all about them. I'm really grateful for that illness that I had. That's what it took for me ultimately to do far more listening than speaking.
And I think about Don Draper, who was a great listener in Mad Men, and he was
interesting
and so influential in that way. And I think about my art. It used to be called the talking cure, but now it's actually called the listening cure. And I think that's a far better.
I've never heard that.
It's better, isn't it? And the listening part of charisma is such a big deal that we believe that we have to shine and deliver. But actually what it is allowing the other person to feel felt, that allows them to walk away and say, I just met somebody super charismatic.
Yeah, that's so cool because I think about and talk about people feeling heard, but I haven't heard someone say feeling felt. And I love that.
Yeah. So that kind of is a concept from interpersonal neurobiology where we have kind of these mind melds, and it's less about like, am I going to impress her? But am I going to connect? And I think that's what you do. And I think that's a big part of influence. We aren't influenced by people we don't like. If Jon Stewart says something, I'm going to take a listen because I like Jon Stewart. And if somebody I don't like says something, I'm going to probably immediately poo-poo it, even if it's great.
Yeah. So we might be influenced in some direction, but not the direction they wanted.
Right.
If we don't like them and we try to ignore them. Yeah.
And it seems like the like ability and the charisma really relates to the influence piece in a huge way.
Absolutely. So people who are listening, when you're meeting somebody, I've discovered that a lot of people don't realize, and Adam, you've probably learned this when you are working in sales or some other time along your path, but how much you can be prepared to like somebody before you actually meet them.
I love that. And that was my experience with you, interestingly. Zoe, I'm noticing time and I've got a gazillion other questions, including I wanted to ask, of course, if I could, because I was so fascinated by Chiquino Scarpa and his incredible ability to...
Oh my God, let's tell everyone to watch the video.
Okay, so...
There's a great video for this.
About a man wanting to bury his Bentley at $450,000.
Let's not tell them what happened.
Not at all, but trust me, this is incredible. Is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet?
Would you ask to be my friend?
I would love to be your friend.
Done. Deal.
Oh, I'm so glad. Right on. Well, my final question, and you will love this as a fellow geek, and I can only infer that you probably love Harry Potter, but if you had the magical Dumbledore ability to confer upon all humanity one skill that would vastly improve their life, what would that skill or even insight be? And how do you expect it would improve their lives as well as the lives of society at large?
Well, that's so beautiful. So I'm not going to go for influence since that's what we've been talking about already. I wish that I could confer self-forgiveness. And I absolutely believe that if we could all forgive ourselves for everything that we're not forgiving ourselves for right now, we can approach each other with such open-minded, open-hearted humility and love and a good sense of humor. That's what I would do.
I'm going to corroborate that as a psychologist and say that would probably be mine as well.
Really?
Yes, because I think that all parties benefit when we are more self-forgiving, self-compassionate. Mm-hmm. It's not the equivalent of self-aggrandizement, or we don't become somehow just more complacent. We actually become more generous, more giving, more able to hear another person. So
I'm so glad to know that that's actually a real
that's a thing. That's a thing.
Thank you.
Well, Zoe, I can't thank you enough. I reached out to you. You met my enthusiasm, and I'm just beyond grateful to you for sharing your treasures with my listeners.
Likewise, it's an honor. Enthusiasm, my friend. Enthusiasm, my friend. Thank you so much.
My friend. Thank you, Zoe.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.